It's recording going. There you go.
Okay, thank you so much, Felicia, and welcome everybody. My name is Birgit Koopsen and I'm a brand ambassador for Gelli Arts. And as I said, I'm in the Netherlands. And I saw a lot of different countries and places on the screen just before, and I'm so happy you're all joining me today. So I'm going to do some colorful fall printing, and because I like fall colors, but with a little twist, because I really like colors, and I want to show you that you can create prints that have a fall feel, but with colors that are a little bit different. And it's actually quite a simple way of gel printing. It's like only 2 layers, and but it's colorful and fun, and you can create really nice covers for instance, notebooks using these prints. So here I have a variety of notebooks that I already made in all kinds of different color combinations, and I'm going to show you how to create these prints. First, how to create the masks to use on your gel plate, and then I'm also going to show you how to assemble these little sketch or notebooks. So today I'm going to work on my 8x10 Gelli Arts Gel Printing plate, and I have it here already on my table, and as you can see, there is already some paint on it because that was leftover paint from an earlier session. And so I discussed with Luann, should I start with a clean plate or should I just leave it on and start with pulling this print from the plate? And I'm actually just going to pull this print, and during this class, you will see how I got to this leftover paint on my plate and how to create a print like that. But before I start printing, I'm going to show you how I created my my leaves to print with. And there are a couple of different ways that you can create these leaves. So the first one is a paper shape. So this one is cut from just regular copier paper. And what I did is I went online and searched for leaf shapes or leaf silhouettes or something like that in Google, and you get a variety of sheets that you can use. You can just save them on your computer and then print them, and then you can just cut them out with scissors. And I just printed these on regular copier paper, not even the heavier one, just regular copier paper. And they are really great to print with, but there is a chance that they will tear when you pull them from the plate, because the paper is really thin, and if you use a lot of paint, the paper might get so wet that you kind of when you peel them off the plate, that they might tear. But if they don't, and you build up a layer of paint on both sides of them, they start to turn in some kind of a plastic some kind of a plastic mask, because acrylic paint that has dried is kind of a thin plastic layer. So the more layers you get on your shapes, the more the less the possibility is that they will tear, and then you can use them like over and over and over again. But you have to be a little bit careful when you pull them off the first couple of times. Then another thing that you can do is just cut leaves from acetate sheets. So here I have one, I don't know if you can see it, that it's glossy. So this is just an acetate sheet, and you can get them, for instance, at Michael's from Recollections. And what you could do then, so these are a bit more sturdy and they will definitely not tear. So if you want to create the mask with the intention of using them a lot of times and keeping them and maybe even cleaning them, then you could use the acetate sheet. And what you can do is just put the acetate sheet on top of your printed leaves, and you could hand draw them. But if that's hard to do, then you can just print a sheet like this and put the acetate sheet on top, trace the leaves, and then cut them out, and you have like a plastic layer. You could even use like a blister packaging, like waste material, and cut out the plastic parts and use them if you want to be more thoughtful about using plastic, for instance, if you have something like that. And finally, what you can use is Dura-Lar Matte. And Dura-Lar is it's like a polyester film. That's what it is, polyester film. And it is translucent. Let me get one sheet. It's a little bit translucent, not completely, but as you can see, my hand shining through. So you could do the same with the printed leaves and put this on top. And as you can see, they are really clear. So you can trace them and then cut them out. Or you could just hand draw some leaves and shapes and then put the Dura-Lar on top and trace them and cut them out. And the Dura-Lar is just as the acetate, very sturdy. It doesn't tear. It's really easy to cut out, and you can even clean it with baby wipes, or with if you want to use them, for instance, with alcohol ink, you can use rubbing alcohol to clean it, and you can use them like over and over and over again. And I have a couple here that I cut from the Dura-Lar. And of course, you can also use dies. Like when you have a die cutting machine and you have leaf shapes, then you can use those to cut out leaves from all three of these possibilities. So you can die cut, of course, paper, but you can also die cut the transparencies, the acetate sheets, and you can also die cut the Dura-Lar. So I will show you in my printing a little bit of a difference between the paper shapes and the Dura-Lar shapes. And you can actually already see it in my leftover paint here. So you can see a couple of leaves where there is still paint that was underneath the shapes. They are blue. So my original color that I printed with was a darker blue, and in the areas where you see no color at all, there were the shapes, but also in the areas where you see the darker blue. And so the difference is that here, where there's no paint left, I use the paper shapes, and the paper actually also picks up the paint from the plate, where the acetate and the Dura-Lar leave the paint on the plate, what's underneath them. So what's in between the Dura-Lar and the plate stays on the plate when you remove the shapes. So if you use Dura-Lar or acetate, the darker color will stay on the plate, where the paper shapes will actually pick up the color from the plate. So that's the difference in your printing, but I think that will all become clear once I start with the first steps. But before I can start with the first steps, I have to clean my plate, and I'm going to do it by just pulling the paint from the plate. And I'm using the white Liquitex Basic, but because this is almost empty and I really need to squeeze it, I just put a little bit on a plate, so it's easier for me to apply it to the plate. And I think we can add another color in there, right? I mean, just white is a little bit boring maybe. So let's add a tiny little bit of yellow. And how about some pink? Let's do some pink. And you will see when I pull up this print that the color I just added to the plate, the white, the pink, and the yellow, will be very visible in the open areas where the paper shapes picked up the original paint, and that's the darker blue that's left behind here will be on top of the yellow and the white. And I have to make sure that this layer is like really, really thin, because if you try to pull up dried paint from the plate and you have too much paint, too much fresh paint on there, your paper will only pick up the top layer of your wet paint and will not be able to also pick up that dried layer underneath. So you have to make sure you have a really thin layer, or if you think that your layer might be too thick, or you're just not sure if you will pick up everything, you can leave your paper on the plate until all the paint is completely dry. Now, I know there are people that are struggling with that, and they say, when I pull up my paper, some of the paper is staying behind on the plate. It's tearing and the paper sticks to the plate and I can't pull it up. And that has to do with the kind of paper you're using. So I'm using quite a heavy card here. I think it's like a cardstock. It's about 65 pounds, I think. And that's like the Recollections cardstock that is available at Michael's. And that's feels almost like a copier paper. It's what I call a hard paper, because the paper is very compressed and you get a very smooth surface, and it's like a hard paper and it will not stick to the plate. And if you have like a normal cardstock that is being used, for instance, for scrapbooking, then that's what I call a soft paper, and you have like fibers and it tears easily. And so if that's the paint dries on the plate, that will tear when you pull it up. I hope that makes sense the way I try to explain it. But if you have like a softer type of paper, the acrylic paint will just work as a glue and it will stick to the plate. But if you have a hard paper, it will all be picked up. As you can see, I left it on the plate quite long and I picked up everything. My plate is completely clean and I have a really pretty print, I think. And this is just leftover paint. This is not even intentional. This is just what stayed on the plate after making my original print. And of course, you can do this intentional. You can decide to go for that dried paint on your plate. And that's what I do a lot, because I really, really like ghost prints and second prints and dried up paint prints, because the difference, you see it very well here between these two, or I can put this one next to this one. So here is a 2-layered print where I have one color combination in the first print, and then I put the mask on and do a print with the second layer on top. And it's, even though I used quite a lot of different colors in here, it's quite clean print, where this one and this one look way more messy, more distressed, more little bits where it didn't pull completely, or where, I don't know, it's a bit more messy than this one, and this appeals more to me, but that's very personal. But if you are like me and you really like this look, this more distressed look, then you can actually go for that second print and leave your leftover paint to dry on the plate to create this. But first things first, let's start with some first layers. And what I like to do, I like to start, this is a leftover paint, this is leftover paint. So let's focus on these. What I like to do is to make a first layer with not too dark colors, because I want my second layer to be pretty opaque. And if you use colors like pink and orange and yellow and like the lighter green, they are a little bit harder to get a really nice opaque layer. So it's easier to use darker colors in your second layer to create that opacity. So I'm just going to create a couple of backgrounds in lighter colors, and I'm going to start with one in yellow and some olive green. And how about a little bit of a teal? And I'm going to mix them very randomly. I don't want I don't want to blend them too much, because I really want a variety of colors in my final leaves, like in these leaves that you can see a lot of different colors in one leaf. If I mix the colors too much, then it will be just one new color, and the prints will be a little bit boring. So I'm just going to roll out very randomly and make sure that I don't mix them too much. So that if I would have like a little open area here, that I can see that there's a variety of colors and not just one color. And so the paper I'm going to print on is a little bit bigger than the plate, and I have to cut the paper later on to get it in the right size for my book. But I do want my 2 layers to be in about the same position, because otherwise there will not be enough room to cut the right size for the cover. So I'm just going to line up my paper with the paper that's underneath my gel plate. And I'm going to do that again with my second layer, so I have them in about the same area, overlapping, because I want the 2 layers to be overlapping. And here I have one of my first layers. There's a little bit of paint left on the plate, but that's okay. I'm just going to add some new colors. And these colors will then also show up in the print. And I actually like my prints a lot better after I made a couple. The first couple are usually too clean to my liking. So when I do a series of prints, then usually after 2 or 3 prints, there will be quite a lot of leftover paint in different colors. And then tiny little bits of colors show up in a print, even though I didn't add them to the plate for that specific print. And that's what I really like. So I'm using a little bit less paint than I did before, because I think that will give a nicer print. It needs a tiny bit more. Too much paint will never give you a really nice print, because you will see in the paint and in the print that there was too much paint on the plate. You get this kind of texture in your paint, and like you can see that it's like a really thick layer of paint on your paper, and I don't really like that. I like it if my layers are really nice and thin and smooth. And also you will have less leftover paint on your plate from these layers, and that's also okay. So I like this one a lot better already than this one. Not only because of the colors, but also the texture. Like you see these big blobs of blue here, where you can actually see that there was a little bit too much paint on the plate. Anyway, that's also a matter of taste, I suppose, but I really like this one. And of course, I did a little bit of preparation already. So I also have a couple here. So you don't have to watch me creating a lot of different backgrounds. But I think this one is still a bit boring. This is a nice one. This one is a bit boring. I think I'm going to add a little bit of color to that one.
Okay, Birgit, somebody
Yes.
just asked, would it be more of an accurate transfer if you used a clean brayer over the paper? I think what she's saying is, you know how you're mixing the colors? You're using the roll-off paper basically to clean the roller, but it's not really all coming off. So she's saying if you used a clean roller for each color,
Yeah.
would you get a more accurate transfer? Maybe you could talk about that.
I'm not sure if I understand what an accurate transfer is.
Well,
So what I
yeah. Go ahead.
can you explain what you mean with that? I mean, I think from the question I get the idea that there is something that she doesn't like about the print, and that could be better if I do it a different way, but I don't understand exactly what.
Okay, let's see what she says. That's a good question. Let's see.
Okay. And there's a little bit left noch still on my plate that I'm also going to pick up. Okay, that's it. I think I have enough backgrounds now to do second layers. And if there's not an answer yet about the question before, then I will just continue, and I hope that that she can explain what she means with the question, because I'm sorry, I just don't understand.
Okay, I think, all right, a few other people weighed in, and they're saying usually you wipe your brayer off on your page, but that's all preference. Like the way that you handle the paint that's left on your roller.
Oh, but I do actually, you don't see it because it's on the side, but I do actually clean my brayer in between. When I add new colors, I have a clean brayer, or at least as clean as possible, when like what you can get when you brayer it off on paper. So when I start a new combination of colors on my plate, then I'm actually using a clean brayer. You just didn't see it because I have the paper on the side, because I have a little bit more room than here. So I hope that is the answer to the question, that I now answered the question.
Yeah, I think
and if
so.
not, then and if not, then please let me know what it is
okay,
that you want to know from me, because I really want to give you the right answer, but I just don't know. I'm sorry. That's the language thing. Okay. So let's pick one of these and create a layer on top. I think I will actually go for this one because I really like these colors. And I just will have to decide now what has to be the color that I put on top. So what you have to think about is, what will I see from this layer? And what you will see from this layer is, if I would put a mask on here, then what you will see in the final print is the color that's underneath this mask. So I'm going to apply paint to the plate, then I'm going to put the masks on top, and all the color that's in between the leaves will be printed on this sheet, which means that the areas where the leaves are on the plate are actually going to be the colors on this print. I hope that makes sense, but I'm going to show you. So I'm sure it will bend. And so I have to decide which colors I want to use that are contrasting enough for the colors on here. And because there are a lot of colors on here, I can't just say, okay, if I have a yellow, so I will do a blue on top, because then I have a nice contrast. So I have to think what would give the nicest contrast. And also in my second layers, I like to use a variety of colors. So I have in my samples here, I have some samples that are like this one is looks as if I used only blue, but I used a couple of different blues, because otherwise it would be just one solid color. But I also have, for instance, in this one, I used a little bit of blue, and I used some olive green, but also some white, to create a nice contrast with the color that's already on my paper. And I think this one could actually use some darker colors. There's quite a lot of light colors in there. So I'm going to use, I'm going to mix, I think, a magenta and a blue, maybe a turquoise. And hopefully that will give a nice contrast. And you can't always tell how well it will work out, because, well, you could, I mean, you could make this like science and really look at your paints to see if they are opaque, and to make sure that you will get a really good contrast, and look at the color wheel and everything. And but I'm more like go with the flow, and maybe my print will not be perfect, but then that is how it is. I sometimes I'm just a little bit disappointed with my print, because I thought it would be a nice one, and then it didn't work out the way I hoped. But if I start thinking about things like that too much, like, is my color opaque enough, or that kind of stuff, it takes away the joy and the spontaneous, I don't know how to
It's
say
spontaneity.
that. Yeah,
That's a long one.
It's a difficult one, from the whole process. So I don't want to do that too much. I just want to pick colors that I like, and then hopefully I have a really nice print. And if not, then I will put another layer on top or something like that. Somehow I will make it work. So I don't think too much about it. But of course, if you want to, you can think about that, and you can have a look at your paints and see if they are opaque, and you can have a look at the color wheel and look at which colors will make the best contrast for your prints. But yeah, that makes it a lot less play. I like to play. When I work with my gel plate, I really like to just play around and see what happens, and I don't want to think too much. I think it's actually really relaxing not to have to think too much, and then in the meantime create something fun and nice, and sometimes like really beautiful. If you do it this way, it also is really rewarding when it does turn out like really nice, and you pick up your paper and you are like, oh, that's really a really nice print, and it's very satisfying. So I like to do it that way. So I've put all my leaves on top, and you will probably see when I lift them up later the difference between the ones with the acetate and the ones with the paper and the Dura-Lar. So I'm going to line up my paper again down here to make sure that this blue color is in about the same position. So at this moment in the Netherlands, it's quite rainy and wet and not too warm. so my paints stay wet long enough for me right now to take the time and put the leaves on the plate, and the paint is not like drying while I'm doing that. But sometimes you have different circumstances, and it might be like a really dry air, or maybe you have a heater on, or outside it's just really hot and dry, and then your paints might dry really fast before you had the time to put down all the masks and put your paper on top. So if that happens in wherever you are, you can put something like a slow dry blending medium in your paint. And so you have a little bit more time to work with it and to decide where you want to put your leaves and stuff like that. And your paint just stays wet a little bit longer. And what I like to do is to mix it on the plate. So I put a few drops of the blending medium on the plate, and I roll it out, and then I add the paint on top, and then roll out my paint. And while I'm doing that, the slow dry medium is actually blending, mixing with the paint, and the paint will be workable a little bit longer. So I'm going to pull up my print, and I'm going to make sure that I rub very well in all the open areas so I get the actual shapes of the leaves. And I think I really like this one. Oh, I really like this one. I think this is really, really pretty. It's better than I expected. So sometimes you're lucky. I even sometimes get lucky while teaching. Most of the time while I'm teaching, I always get the prints that are not so good. And I always have to explain that even I will have prints that are not so pretty, but I think this one is really pretty. Okay, so this worked out really nice. And now I have all my masks on the plate, and let's see if what I explained before is happening. So there is no paint in between left on the plate, which means that my layer was actually just the right amount of paint to create this print. And it was not too much, so there's no paint left in between. But these are the paper masks, and as you can see, there is no or hardly any paint underneath, because it's just being picked up by the paper. I have to be really careful while removing this, because otherwise it will tear. Although I have to say, the more layers you get on the paper, the more plasticky they get, the more they also will resist the paint. But here is one of the acetate shapes, and as you can see, it's just not picking up that much paint from the plate, and it's leaving that paint behind, which is just perfect for that ghost print or that second print. Here we go. This one just broke, and I can feel it's like really wet, and it was just, there were just not enough layers on top of each other yet to keep it from tearing. And so if you like this effect of the paint that's left underneath the mask, then I would definitely recommend using acetate or Dura-Lar to create your mask, because then that is what you get. But even the tiny little bits of outline that are left from the paper mask give a really nice effect, I think, when you pull them. So to pull this paint, I have to make sure that it is dry, because if I would put new paint on top of this and I would roll it out, I would just mix it and I will totally lose the shapes, because it's just going to mix with new wet paint. And as you can see, my fingerprint is now there. It's not wet, not dry yet, so I have to wait a little bit. Let me see where I have.
So Brigitte, she came back, Letty came back and told us that while you're waiting to let this dry, I thought I would say, she was asking if when you have your print and you put your paper, you place your paper down and you're rubbing with your hands, she was wondering if you rubbed it with a roller, if that would give you a more complete print.
Ah, I see. Okay, now I get it. Yeah, now I get it. Okay, so that doesn't really, I don't think that really matters whether you do it with your hands or with your brayer. You can put quite a lot of pressure on there with your hands, and I really like doing it with my hands because I don't know, when I feel the paper that I know that I put enough pressure everywhere, that it just feels different than doing that with the brayer. I don't know, it's kind of the same, like I would, if not necessary, I will never wear gloves when I do something creative because I want to feel and touch everything. And that's the same also with the rubbing. I want to feel, especially when you work with mask like this, that you can actually feel the difference in height, because then you also know that you put enough pressure in these little areas and pick up the paint from these little areas in between. That is something that you don't feel when you use your brayer. So you don't really know whether or not you have gone into these areas. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But you can definitely use your brayer if that is what you prefer. But that's the same as with whether or not you like the distressed look. It's a matter of preference and personal, how you feel about it. But with both ways, you will be able to get the same result. So I would say this should be dry enough to pull. And what color are we going to use? I think we can use some. What do you suggest? Any suggestions for this, to pick this up? How about some orange? Maybe, I think blue, purple, and orange will make a nice contrast.
All right, somebody said gold.
Oh, let me see if I have some gold here. I do have some gold here. I have to mix the gold now with the orange because I could maybe take off the orange.
Okay, so far you have gold, yellow, and magenta.
Gold. Oh, that is actually quite a nice combination, gold, yellow, and magenta. How about we just use all three of them? We're just going to use all three of them and then see how that works out. Is this a magenta? Permanent rose is not really a magenta. Let me see. I just had a magenta here. Here we have. I do a tiny little bit of magenta here and here, and the rest I'm going to put gold. And no matter how this works out, the gold will give it a really nice shine for sure. So let's see. I'm first going to spread a little bit of that color. And now I'm going to roll out the gold. That is a really good choice, the gold. Let's see how that works out. And so I'm going to print this on a clean sheet, because this is going to be like a one pull print. This doesn't need any layers. Of course, you could print this also on an already existing print with leaves, because especially the gold will be quite translucent, and you would then also still see the first print underneath. just play with that, just play with layers and see what happens when you build up a number of layers. Whether or not you are using masks, just simply building up layers of color can also be really nice if you are mixing translucent and opaque colors together. I think another really pretty print. I don't know if you can see the shine when I keep it to the light. I think it's a little bit hard to see.
Well, we can see just a little bit.
But I do see it, and it's really nice. You can definitely see that it is gold, and especially in the areas where there's also color, like here. In the area where the yellow and the magenta is, you can really see that the gold is mixed with that. Very nice, I think. Okay, so that is how I built up these layers, and then I also want to show you real quick how I assemble the books. I mean, I think, let me know if there was anything not clear about building up these layers, because this is all it is, 2 layers. 1 layer with a variety of colors, and then the second layer on top with contrasting colors and putting the masks on. That's all it is. It doesn't take any more than this to create these prints. So if there's anything not clear about that right now, just let me know, and otherwise I will show you how I assemble the books. I'm just going to put this one away, and I have one print here that I have already cut to size, because it's really hard to cut something to size underneath a camera like this one here, because I have to stand up and I usually bend over, and then the camera is like all over the place. So I've already cut this one, and you can make it any size you want, but of course I printed on an 8x10 gel plate, so it had to be smaller than that to get the straight edges. And so, for instance, like here, this is why I try to kind of line up my paper, because you can see here that it didn't go, the second layer went a little bit over the edge of the first layer here, and I missed the beginning of the first layer on this side, which means that I will have to cut my paper a little bit smaller if I want these edges to be overlapping each other completely. So that's why I try to line them up. My paper here, and of course I measure in centimeters, but I will try to tell you in inches. Although I have no idea how to call all the ones in between. So I know this is 9 inch and this would be 9.5 inch. But then when I get to number 4 here, I have no idea how to call it. But this is 9 inches and 4 little.
So it's right before the half. Is that it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So it's almost 9.5.
It's almost 9.5. Well, yeah. So let's say it's almost 9.5.
How many centimeters is it? I'll convert it.
So in centimeters, it is 24 centimeters
24
by 24.
So that's 9.44 inches.
Okay. And this is 18 centimeters. So that would be about 7.1 or something.
That's exactly right. 7.08. So 7.1 inches. Mm-hmm.
So, but it doesn't really matter how big you make it, because you will put the paper in yourself and you can make it any size you want. So if you have to cut off a little bit more to get a really nice cover, then you can cut off a little bit more. No problem. And I just fold it in half. And then this is my cover. And I like to put in just a regular copier paper, because it's really nice and thin and easy to fold, and and to cut, and so it's easy to assemble the books. But of course, you could use any paper you like. If you want to make it a sketchbook or a watercolor book or whatever, you can adjust the paper to your needs. But I have some copier paper here. And I think with regular copier paper, you can put in about, I don't know, 8 or 10 folded sheets. And of course, because I stapled them, so it should not be too thick to staple. But you could definitely also use a thread to bind it, to sew the book together, and then you can make it a little bit thicker. But let's go with about 8 sheets. And of course, I have to cut them to size, and I can cut them to size before assembling the book. But I like to do it this way, where I cut it to size after assembling it, because when maybe you can see it here, when you have a lot of pages inside of each other, the inner pages will stick out because they are kind of coming out because of the fold here in the end, right? And it's getting thicker and thicker, and then they stick out. So I have to cut them anyway after assembling the book to get these all lined up. So for me, it's easier to cut them afterwards, because then I can just put my ruler next to the cover and know for sure that I have the right size. Whereas I would cut them before, I might cut them too short or not straight, or they will stick out a little bit anyway. So, and then I have to cut twice. So I'm just going to do it like this. And I like to use clips to hold everything together and make sure that I get in, that the pages don't move when I use the stapler. And I'm just going to line up one side, either the top or the bottom of the book, and then put the clip in there, on there. So that is not a really tight one. This one is better. So the paper doesn't move. And now I'm just going to use my long arm stapler, this one, to put in my staples. And again, you can totally use science here and measure everything and have the staples exactly 1 inch from the top or the bottom and 5 inch in between of them, or whatever you want. But I just eyeball this and I'm like, okay, I think this would be a good place for a staple. And I just put it in. And now my stapler is messing with me, but it's not going through all the way. Maybe because the paint feels still a little bit wet, I don't know. Anyway, this one is better. I have to take this one out later and put it back in again. But now you can see what I said before, that it will kind of sometimes not be exactly in the right position, and I have to cut it anyway. So this is why I don't cut it before I put it together. I do it afterwards, and then I only have to cut once. And I'm just going to put my ruler exactly along the edge of my book. And I will try not to move my camera while I'm doing this. And cut so I get all of the pages exactly the same size and nicely lined up. as you can see, this is now a really nice, even a stack of paper. And even easier is it if you have like a big cutting machine that is big enough to like cut in one go. Makes it even easier. And even the one that the side that I lined up didn't stay lined up when I stapled it. So that's not even necessary to do. You can also just cut all of them afterwards, because it's much easier to cut paper when more is sticking out than when you have only a tiny little bit sticking out for some reason. So here you go. Oh, look, I didn't fold it really nicely. So on the back, I see that the paper is too big still. Anyway, so I'm just going to cut on this side now because it sticks out, and it will also cut a little bit from the front cover, but that's okay because in the end, the cover and the pages all need to be the same size as well in the front as on the back. And now it should be, yes. Now I have a nice little notebook. So, and if you think that this is still too clean, then you can add some splattering, like let's say raindrops or something like that. And let me just get my Posca markers out. I don't think I put them on supply list, but if you happen to have some, then this is something you can add. Of course, you could also draw on top of this. You could take a white Posca or a different color and draw the outline of the leaves if you want to, or you could even put veins in there or something like that. But a really easy way to add even more color and some texture, especially when you have a background that is quite solid, then you can just use wrong box. Some paint markers. I have Poscas here, but any paint marker will work. Doesn't really matter as long as it's a paint marker. How about putting some hot pink on top of this one? Maybe some white. So I shake them because there's acrylic paint inside, paint markers, and but you have the pigments and the fluid, and when they are not being used for a while, then the fluid separates from the pigments, and you need to shake them to mix them again. And then I'm just going to use my scissors and add some splatters to my cover. And what a difference that makes. It makes it even more, it gives it even more like a fall feel, don't you think? Like it's wet outside, it's a little bit rainy, kind of like raindrops and fog. Yeah, I like that. Well, I think this is it. I hope you enjoyed it, because this is a really simple way, I think, to create maybe even a fun gift. It's nice to give away something, create little notebooks or little sketchbooks or art journals. You could even use a little bit thicker paper for your cover and make it a little bit more sturdy. You can do many things with this, but what I really wanted to show is how easy it can be. Gel printing, that you can create something really nice and fun with only 2 layers and some hand cut masks. So my next class will be in 2 weeks, I think. Am I right? November or is it already in 1 week? What was it, November 4? Or I'm sure Luann knows. I'm just going to wait.
Oh, wait, no. I should write it down before. I have to look.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, in my next class, we are going, I think it's this one. We're going to create cards. I hope I'm not lying here. Luann is looking.
Hold on, I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
We're getting there. Anyway, it is going to be cards, and it's either going to be these cards or it's going to be holiday cards. November 4th, yes. And I think it's
and the 4th.
And it's these cards. So we're going to make these cards in my next class, and that's already next week. So I hope you will join me again then, and for some more colorful fun. And I hope you enjoyed today. Thank you for being here, and see you next time.